Have you ever wondered what truly happens the instant we take our last breath? Not what religious books repeat or the vague promises we hear in sermons, but the vision of someone who claimed to have crossed the border between life and death countless times in a deep trance. Today we're going to open a rare and almost forgotten window into the words of Edgar Casey, the so-called sleeping prophet, in a kind of forbidden interview. Forbidden not because the law stops us, but because his answers always challenge the certainties of his time, and still bother those who are afraid to look beyond life's curtain. Imagine for a moment that Casey were here, sitting before us, ready to answer the question everyone carries in their heart: what happens after we die? Some would say this is the question that shapes all others. For if we knew the answer, we would live differently, wouldn't we? Perhaps with less fear, perhaps with more urgency, perhaps with more serenity. This conversation, then, is not just about the afterlife, it's about the now, about how to live, knowing that death is not an end but merely a passage. Before we delve into what Casey claimed to have seen, it's important to remember who he was. A simple man, from rural America, born at the end of the 19th century, who barely completed elementary school. He didn't study theology, nor medicine, nor philosophy. And yet, in a trance, with his eyes closed, he seemed to access knowledge impossible for someone of his background. He described illnesses with precision, suggested cures, narrated past lives, and, most importantly, spoke of what comes after death. Many rejected him, calling him a charlatan. Others revered him as a prophet. But one thing is certain. His words continue to echo because they didn't just answer curiosity. They touched the deepest human pain, the fear of ceasing to exist. And here we begin, the forbidden interview. If I could put the question directly to him, it would be this: Edgar, what happens the instant life abandons us? And the answer, according to his accounts, came calmly, almost like someone describing a journey they've made many times. Consciousness does not fade. It detaches from the body like someone taking off heavy, worn clothing. At first there's a strangeness. The body is there, but it's no longer you. Many don't believe it immediately. Some try to speak to family members, touch their hands, call their names, but their voice is no longer heard. And soon a soft light appears, not like a blinding spotlight, but like a familiar call. It is towards this that the soul turns, even when it resists. Now think with me. How many times have you heard similar descriptions in near-death experiences? People who stopped breathing for a few minutes and returned to tell about a tunnel, a light, a feeling of peace. Well, Casey said this long before these accounts became popular. For him, death was neither punishment nor emptiness. It was a return to a greater home, where each soul finds not only rest, but also responsibility. Because according to him, no one escapes from themselves. What we plant here, we reap there, and back again in new experiences. And I ask, how does this vision change how we view life now? If death is not an end, but a continuation, wouldn't every gesture, even the simplest, be part of a future harvest? Casey spoke of life as a school that doesn't end in a single existence. He said that we have lived before and will live again, until we learn the lessons of love, compassion, and balance. For some, this idea is comforting. For others, it's disturbing. After all, who would want to think that the mistakes we make will still accompany us onward? But isn't that, in a way, what we already feel right here? An thoughtless act can weigh on us for years. A kindness, on the other hand, can illuminate the memory of an entire life. There's something curious about how Casey described the afterlife. There was no judgment in the sense of a divine court with accusations and sentences. There was, however, an unavoidable mirror. The soul sees itself as it truly is, not as it thought it was nor as others judged it, but naked before its own truth. Is that frightening? Perhaps. But it is also liberating, because according to him, in this mirror there is no condemnation, only clarity. And from clarity comes the will to correct, to learn, to return. But you might be asking yourself, so is everything a never-ending cycle? Born, die, return, again? Casey responded with impressive calm. No, it is not a meaningless circle. It is a staircase. Each life is a step. Sometimes we climb, other times we slip, but always upwards until we reunite with what he called the greater consciousness. God, the Creator, the Source. Call it what you will. And it is at this point that the interview becomes forbidden. Because accepting this vision challenges both the rigidity of traditional religion and scientific skepticism. It is to look death in the eye and say, I know you are not the end, and see how this particularly touches those who already feel the weight of years. After 60, 70, 80, death ceases to be a distant abstraction and becomes a constant presence, sometimes silent, sometimes painful. Friends depart, family members pass on, and the question becomes inevitable. When my time comes, what will I find? Emptiness or continuity? Nothingness or light? In listening to Casey, many elderly people found peace, not because he promised an easy heaven of rewards, but because he showed that every experience, even pain, had purpose. Nothing is lost. Nothing is in vain. But there is a fascinating detail. Casey said that what we take with us after death are not possessions, nor titles, nor external achievements. We only take what becomes part of our essence, choices, lessons, loves. It's as if upon crossing the border, everything superficial is left behind like unnecessary baggage. This makes you think, if everything we build here boils down to memories and feelings, shouldn't we value those small moments that seem so trivial more? A grandchild's smile, a friend's forgiveness, the kindness we offer without expecting anything in return. Perhaps these are the true riches. Of course, all of this might sound like fantasy to some, and that's the beauty of the mystery. No one here has definitive proof. But what captures our attention is the coherence of what Casey described in different trances, always with the same serenity. What if it wasn't just imagination? What if, in fact, he was accessing greater knowledge? Think about it. Thousands of people sought his readings and left transformed, not because they received a guarantee of an easy life, but because they felt that their pains and losses were part of something greater. And here we come to an initial reflection that I leave with you. If death is just a chapter, how would you like to be remembered in this part of the story? Not as someone perfect, because no one is, but perhaps as someone who learned, who loved, who grew despite the difficulties. Casey's answer to life after death isn't just about what happens there. It's about how to live so that the transition is peaceful, without regrets that hold us back. If we were to continue this interview with Casey, the next question would be inevitable. Edgar, what happens after we cross the light? Is it just eternal rest, or is there something more ahead? And he answered without hesitation, there is no inertia in the spirit. There is movement, learning, continuity. Rest is just a brief stop, like someone pausing at an inn before resuming their journey. This simple but powerful phrase was enough to change how many viewed death. Because you see, most religious traditions speak of an eternal, immutable heaven or hell. Casey, however, described a living process in which each soul continued to grow, learn, correct, and begin anew. He said that, after detaching from the body, the soul is drawn to a state that corresponds to what it built within itself during life. It is not an external punishment, but an internal reflection. Those who cultivated peace find peace. Those who carried hatred experience an environment of hatred. It is as if we are trapped by our own creations. And here arises a point that frightens, but also liberates. There is no one punishing us. We ourselves mold the environment we go to. Is it hard to accept that? Yes. But it is also profoundly just, because no one can hide from what they are inside. Now, imagine an elderly person carrying guilt from past mistakes. Unsaid words, hurtful gestures, lost opportunities. The first reaction might be fear. Will I pay for all of this when I die? Casey, however, offered a different vision. He said that the soul is not bound by the error, but by the desire to learn from it. If there is true repentance, there is also the opportunity to correct in new experiences. Death does not close doors. On the contrary, it opens paths for evolution to continue. It is not a court that condemns. It is a classroom that never closes. And see how this transforms our relationship with the fear of death. If there is no eternal condemnation, but rather continuous learning, the big question ceases to be, what will happen to me there? And becomes, what can I learn here and now to take with me? It's almost like packing a suitcase for a long journey. Some fill their luggage with useless, heavy things that hinder the way. Others take only the essentials, what will truly sustain them. Life from this perspective is the chance to choose well what we carry beyond it. But Casey went further. He spoke of something that still causes controversy today, reincarnation. For him, the soul not only continues to live, it returns. And it returns not as a punishment, but as an opportunity to continue learning. Souls that failed to love get new chances to love. Souls that abused power get new opportunities to serve. Souls that lived only for themselves get the chance to experience empathy. Think about it. How many of the encounters we have in life, sometimes brief, sometimes intense, carry the weight of previous stories we have lived and forgotten? It's a difficult idea to accept, I know, but it's also an idea that offers meaning to sufferings that otherwise would seem unjust and purposeless. And here I ask you directly, how many times have you felt an immediate connection with someone, as if you've known them for a long time, even meeting them for the first time? How many times have you experienced a feeling of déjà vu, as if you had already lived that scene? For Casey, these are not accidents of the mind. They are fragments of a larger memory, echoes of previous experiences. And all of this connects to the great cycle of life and death. We die, cross the light, rest, reflect, and return, until our soul is mature enough not to need to return anymore. Now, an important detail. Casey did not describe reincarnation as something automatic, like a blind wheel. He said that the soul chooses, along with higher forces, where and how to return according to what it needs to learn. If it needs to develop patience, perhaps it will come into a life with physical limitations. If it needs to learn humility, perhaps it will experience poverty. If it needs to exercise compassion, it may be born amidst the pain of others. This may seem harsh, but it is also profoundly just. For everything serves a greater growth, and nothing is lost. But perhaps the most comforting point is this. According to Casey, no one is alone in this process. When the soul crosses death, it is met by guides, spiritual friends, family members who have already passed. It is not a solitary journey. It's like arriving at a station where those who departed before come to meet us. Imagine for a moment reuniting with those you loved and lost. It is not a promise of romance or fantasy, but the idea that true bonds are not broken by death. They transform, but continue to accompany us. And here emerges a revelation that deeply moved those who listened to Casey. He said that even the gravest errors, those that seem unforgivable, are not definitive. Because deep down the soul is always part of the divine. No darkness is greater than the light that created us. This does not mean there are no consequences. There are, and always will be. But it means that no soul is lost forever. There will always be a new path, a new chance, a new life. Think of the relief this brings, even to those who have spent their entire lives fearing an eternal hell. Now I want to open a personal reflection with you, who are listening to me. If it is true that life continues and that we return to learn, what do you think you still need to learn? Perhaps patience? Perhaps detachment? Perhaps forgiveness? Perhaps allowing yourself to be loved more? Such questions place us before ourselves, and perhaps that is the greatest richness of this forbidden interview. It doesn't matter if you believe every detail or not. What matters is the power these ideas have to awaken us to a more conscious, fuller life, more connected to what truly matters. And remember, Casey never asked people to blindly believe him. He said that his visions should be put to the test in each person's life. Don't believe me? Try living as if it were true and see the result. This is powerful, because it shifts faith from blind belief to daily practice. It's not about expecting rewards in the afterlife, but about perceiving right here the fruits of living with more love, more compassion, more courage. And perhaps this is the central point so far. Life after death, according to Casey, is not a distant mystery. It is a mirror that asks us to live more consciously today, because when we cross the border, we will not be judged by external rules, but only by the truth we already carry within us. This is the revelation that for many is liberating, because it means that until the last moment, we can choose what we want to take with us. And there is always time to change course. But of course, there are still open questions. Casey spoke of different planes of existence, levels that the soul crosses after death, as if it were a ladder leading ever closer to the divine. He also said that the choices we make here determine how far we can go there. And it is precisely there that our imaginary interview will delve deeper next. Because after all, if the soul goes through different stages, what are they? What awaits us in each one? And how does this shape the way we approach our journey today? If we were to continue this interview with Edgar Casey, the natural question would be, Edgar, after the soul passes through death, where exactly does it go? Is there a defined place, like the heaven described by religions? And he would answer surprisingly, there isn't just one place, but many. He spoke of planes, levels of consciousness, dimensions that reveal themselves as the soul is prepared to access them. Imagine an enormous staircase, where each step represents a stage of consciousness. We all start on lower steps, but with effort and learning we can ascend. It's not a race, but a unique journey for each being. The first of these stages, according to Casey, is the closest to Earth. Many souls remain there for some time, still caught up in material concerns. Some don't accept that they have died. Others remain attached to family members, homes, objects. That's why so many traditions speak of spirits that don't rest. For Casey, this is not a myth. It is simply the expression of souls who, out of attachment or fear, cannot move on. And see how this touches on something profoundly human. Who among us doesn't struggle to let go of what they love? But he said that sooner or later, all souls are helped to understand that they need to move on. None remain lost forever. Climbing a little higher, he spoke of intermediate planes, where the soul begins to experience peace. There are no more physical pains, nor the initial confusion. It's like waking from a dream and realizing there is clarity. In this stage, according to Casey, the soul reviews its own life, not like a movie that flashes before one's eyes in seconds, but as a deep dive into the choices it made. It relives feelings, perceives the effects it had on others, understands where it grew and where it failed. It's as if life is returned in detail, not to condemn, but to teach. Think of how many things we do without realizing their impact. How many words spoken in anger leave marks on someone for years. How many small kindnesses, almost forgotten, become a balm in another person's memory. All of this returns, and in that return, we learn. Casey said that after this review, the soul is drawn to the plane that corresponds to its state of consciousness, and here begins the spiritual ascent. Each plane is like a more advanced classroom. Initially, we learn to free ourselves from selfishness, fear, anger. In higher stages, we learn true compassion, wisdom, and union with the divine. He described up to 7 main planes, but admitted there were more, beyond human comprehension. The higher, the closer to absolute light. And this leads us to an inevitable question. How high would you like to ascend when your time comes? Now think with me, if each plane reflects what we carry inside, isn't it obvious that preparation for death happens in life? It's no use waiting for miracles at the last moment if we spend decades cultivating resentment. At the same time, it's never too late to change, because every act of kindness, every gesture of understanding, every reconciliation increases our alignment with higher planes. It's like tuning an instrument. The more in tune, the more harmony. Casey insisted on this. It's not what we believe, but how we live that determines where our soul goes. And here emerges something that many found uncomfortable in his words. There are no shortcuts. It is not enough to belong to a religion, perform rituals, or recite prayers. All of these can help, but what truly matters is the state of the heart. It is possible to attend temples one's entire life and still remain trapped in the initial planes because one never worked on pride, vanity, or resentment. On the other hand, someone simple, uneducated, without a defined religion, but who lived with love and honesty can ascend quickly. This was the justice Casey saw. No one is evaluated by the label, but by the essence. And see how this resonates with the elderly public. Anyone who reaches an advanced age knows that life is not made of titles, nor material achievements. All of that dissolves with time. What remains are affections, memories, gestures. Many look back and ask themselves, did I do enough? Did I leave a worthwhile legacy? Casey's vision answers, the legacy is not measured by size, but by truth. Even the smallest act of love is a ladder to higher planes, but don't think he only spoke of solace. There were also warnings. Casey said that souls too attached to selfishness, hatred, or ambition can become stagnant in dense planes, experiencing the weight of what they cultivated. It is not an imposed punishment, but the natural consequence of what one has lived. Like someone who gets drunk and suffers a hangover, it is not punishment, it is a result. And only when the soul recognizes this can it move to higher levels. This shows that freedom is total, but so is responsibility. Now pause for a moment and think, if you had to climb this ladder today, on what rung do you believe you would be? This is not a question to generate guilt, but to awaken consciousness, because there is still time to climb higher. There is still time to reconcile, to forgive, to lighten your load. Casey said that the soul never loses the chance to grow, even after death, but the sooner we do it in life, the smoother the transition will be. Another fascinating aspect Casey described were the encounters the soul has on these planes. He spoke of spiritual guides who lead, masters who teach, and family members who welcome, not as sentimental fantasy, but as a natural reality of spiritual life. It's like arriving in a new environment and finding people already there, ready to guide us. This detail for many brought enormous relief, because it means no one crosses the beyond alone. There is always help, always companionship, always welcome. For those who fear the loneliness of death, this is perhaps the most comforting revelation. But Casey also made a point of saying, these guides do not live our lives for us. They guide, but the choices remain ours. Freedom is the greatest gift, and with it comes responsibility. This means that spiritual life is not a paradise where everything is easy, but a space of continuous learning. There are still challenges, there are still tasks, there is still progress to be made. Death does not erase our imperfections like a magic eraser. It merely places us before them more clearly. And it is precisely this clarity that can be frightening. Casey said that many, when faced with their own flaws, feel shame, pain, regret. But it is this pain that drives change. It's like a child who falls and learns not to repeat the same mistake. It's not punishment, it's growth. And, according to him, this law is the same for everyone, without exception. The rich and the poor, the educated and the simple, the believer and the unbeliever, all cross the same ladder. The only difference lies in how each one prepared. And perhaps this is the most important message of this segment of our conversation. Life after death is not a prize or a punishment. It is continuity. It is the harvest of what was sown. It is the school of the soul. Knowing this should not fill us with fear, but with serene responsibility. Because every gesture, every word, every thought is building the steps of our future. And when the crossing comes, the only question that will remain is, what did I feed my soul with until now? But there is still one part of Casey's vision that remains the most mysterious of all, the soul's ultimate destiny. He said that, beyond all planes and reincarnations, there is a point where it is no longer necessary to return. A point where we fully unite with divine consciousness, without separation, without pain, without the need to learn. It's like coming home after a long journey. And the question that remains for the next moment of our interview is, how do we get there? What defines when the soul is ready to no longer return? If we were before Casey once more and asked, Edgar, is there a point where the soul ceases to return to earth? A point where the cycle of birth and death finally ends? He would pause as if weighing his words, and then reply, yes. That point is when the soul no longer needs to learn through matter. When everything that needed to be purified has been worked through. When individual identity dissolves in union with the source. In other words, it is when the journey reaches its final destination. And that destination is not a physical place, but a state of fullness, of unity with the Creator. This idea at first glance can seem daunting. After all, we think so much about maintaining our identity, our name, our memories, that the notion of dissolving sounds like loss. But Casey said it is not loss, it is return. It is like the drop returning to the ocean. The drop does not cease to exist, but becomes part of something infinitely greater. And this is the end of all human quests, the feeling of being complete, without emptiness, without lack, without pain. We no longer need to search because we have already re-encountered what we have always been a part of. But how do we get to this point? According to Case, it is not through the accumulation of power, nor external perfection, nor rigid dogmas. It is through learning love in its purest form. Love that is not possession, nor desire, nor self-interest. Love that understands, accepts, serves, gives without expecting. Each life we live is a lesson on this path. Sometimes we learn through suffering, other times through affection, other times through the simple act of letting go of ego. Love is the key, he said, and it is love that decides when we no longer need to return. Now think with me. What is truly important in your life today? You may have achieved material things, you may have had personal victories, you may have accumulated memories, but when you look back, what truly warms your heart are not possessions, but the moments when you loved and were loved. The hug of a child, the outstretched hand of a friend, the memory of someone who believed in you when no one else did. These are the experiences that bring us closer to the final destination. Everything else is lost, but love remains. Casey also said that, even for souls who still need to return, each passage through the spiritual world strengthens the consciousness of this greater love. It's as if with each journey, we carry an extra spark of understanding. So even if it takes many lives, each one is a step towards return. This vision, for those who have lived a lot, is especially powerful, because it shows that nothing was in vain. Even pains, losses, and failures are part of the soul's refinement. You can look at past scars and realize that they made you more human, more compassionate, more wise. But there was one detail in Casey's revelations that was deeply intriguing. He said that each soul, upon reaching this final state of unity, does not lose its individuality in the human sense, but transcends it. It's as if our personal memory is just one page in a much larger book. Upon uniting with the Creator, the soul perceives not only who it was, but also how it was connected to all others. We are not isolated drops. We are currents of the same river. This changes everything, because it means that deep down no one walks alone. What happens to one resonates in all, and greater love is precisely recognizing this unity. Now imagine for a moment the comfort this vision offers to those who fear death. It is not disappearing. It is not falling into emptiness. It is returning to a greater home where we finally rest, not because we stop, but because we no longer need to struggle. And see how this connects to life in old age. When we reach a point where the body no longer responds as before, where losses accumulate, where the feeling of an end approaches, this vision opens a window of serenity. It is not an end. It is a transition. It is not loss. It is a return. It is not loneliness. It is a reunion. But Casey also made it clear that it's not enough to simply wait for the final destiny. The path there depends on daily choices. It's as if every moment is a step on the ladder. We can climb with small acts of kindness, or we can stagnate in resentment. We can advance by forgiving or remain trapped by old hurts. Death does not automatically resolve what we avoid resolving in life. That's why he always encouraged, do it now, love now, forgive now, serve now. Because life is not a rehearsal, it's practice. What we don't transform here, we will have to transform in other opportunities. But if we can advance on the path today, why wait? And here I ask you directly, if you knew you were in the last chapter of your life, what would you do differently today? What phone call would you make? What reconciliation would you seek? What unspoken words would you finally release? These are the questions Casey would put before us, because he knew that, in the end, it's not the great deeds that define the soul, but the quality of the love we manage to live and share. There is one last revelation that makes this interview so impactful. Casey said that, at the moment of death, each soul clearly sees that it was never separated from God. Separation was just an illusion created by material life. This awakening is what we call return. Imagine realizing at the moment of departure that the Creator was by your side all along, in every pain, in every joy, in every silence, and that all of life's effort was merely to rediscover what was already within us. This is not a punishment, it is a gift, and perhaps upon hearing this you feel relief because it means there's no way to fail on the soul's journey. Some take longer, others less, but everyone reaches the destination. Everyone comes home. Everyone reunites with the source. What we can choose is whether we will make this journey smoother, with more love and less resistance, or if we will prolong the pain by clinging to what should have already been left behind. And that choice only you can make. And so we come to the end of our forbidden interview with Edgar Casey. He, a simple man who never sought fame, left the world messages that still bother some and comfort others. But above all, he left an invitation to live with the awareness that death is not the end but part of a larger journey. If you have come this far with me, it is because you also feel this calling. And perhaps it is time to turn this knowledge into practice, because every day can still be lived as preparation for the final reunion. Before we say goodbye, I want to ask you something simple, yet powerful. If this video brought you peace, reflection, or hope, please like it and subscribe to the channel. Not just to support me, but because by doing so, you help this message reach other people who, like you, are seeking answers, comfort, and meaning in this phase of life. And who knows, together we can build a community of souls who walk side by side unafraid of the end, because they know that the end is only the beginning.